Hi, everyone. Welcome to my latest lecture, Banks versus Credit Unions. My name's Tim Nash. Is anyone in Canada really happy with their bank? I doubt it. In fact, there are lots of reasons people are angry at their banks. They are complicit in everything from climate change to war crimes. Lucky for us, we have a choice. Canada is blessed with a great cooperative banking system with our credit unions. In today's episode, I dive into why so many Canadians are ditching their banks. I also talk about some of the myths surrounding credit unions that might be holding you back from switching. Let's jump into it. So this is a topic that I care so much about. I've got kind of my own personal journey when it comes to this, which is that I grew up with an account. My parents set up an account for me at a bank that was acquired by Scotiabank. So I just had a Scotia bank sort of by default, and I really didn't give much thought to it. And then it was probably, a couple years after I graduated from university that I just had a terrible experience with them. And that's when I started learning about the credit union system. Since then, that was probably about 15, 17 years ago. I've been with credit unions ever since. And, I think the case for people switching from a bank to a credit union has just absolutely grown tremendously. So, before I get into it, I am going to talk a little bit about banks behaving badly, but I do want to be clear, I've got nothing against people who work for banks, individuals who are there. Banks also do a lot of good things that, they spend a lot of marketing dollars telling us about all the good things that they're doing. But I am going to be focusing a little bit tonight on the things that banks maybe don't want you to know, the behavior that for me has been an absolute deal breaker, and hopefully help you understand why I think so many people are ditching their banks for credit unions. So when it comes to banks behaving badly, really there are a whole bunch of stories that I could cover here. The one I want to start with, this is the most recent one. This literally came out within the last week or two. That I don't know if anyone saw this, that TD Bank got slapped with a $3.1 billion US dollars. This is a US situation. So it's 3.1 billion US in fines for money laundering of fentanyl trafficking and terrorist financing. I don't know if y'all saw this, but this to me is just an absolutely incredible story. Basically, what it comes down to is that TD Bank expanded into the US, and a lot of their US branches, employees were getting bribed to help to sort of turn a blind eye, to look the other way, and when money laundering was taking place. And a lot of this were drug cartels from Mexico and I believe from China. And there is a direct link to fentanyl dealers that were laundering their money through TD. So this is an issue that when I saw this, I got so angry. I got so upset. I've got a bit of a personal story here, which is when I was 18, I had a dear friend of mine overdose, and he died from heroin. It was a heroin overdose, and it absolutely broke my heart. And it really kind of changed the way I looked at the drug system. And that has been, such a big thing for me, is understanding that we are in a crisis when it comes to use of narcotics and hard drugs and fentanyl. I don't know if anyone in the chat has had a personal experience with someone they love getting either addicted to fentanyl, or sometimes fentanyl is found inside of other drugs. And, the lethal dose is just so tiny that it can be an absolute serious problem. And here are the people that are profiting from this, laundering their money through TD Bank. So, it really is, Emily says this fact is so disturbing. Ryan's saying, wow, it really is. I don't think a lot of people caught this story in Canada. But the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said explicitly that TD Bank chose profits over compliance in order to keep its costs down. So yes, this was individuals and employees at the branch level who were getting bribed to look the other way. But there was a huge oversight issue from the top, that TD was not doing their job in terms of flagging these transactions. This is absolutely something that should get caught and flagged and shut down right away. But because they weren't spending enough money on compliance issues, this was happening, whether they knew about it or not, doesn't really matter. But this is the money laundering. Elizabeth asks, where does the money go from the fines? That's a good question. I don't know. I know it's like the Department of Justice, and there's another sort of forget what it was called, but sort of money laundering division within the banking oversight in the U.S. So I'm not sure where this fine goes, whether it goes to U.S. taxpayers or whether there are programs that it's going to go to support. But needless to say that TD Bank got dinged for $3.1 billion U.S., which is just absolutely ridiculous. So that to me is like a personal issue of an issue where absolutely we saw that a bank was putting profits over compliance on this issue. But there are lots and lots of reasons why people are upset with their banks. I know for a lot of us in the climate world, that we've been upset at the banks for a very long time. I've got an article here from CBC that says stop funding fossil fuels, protesters tell RBC at a Montreal rally. But I've been to rallies here in Toronto and across the country. We've seen protests, climate protests, really going after the banks for their fossil fuel financing. This should come as no surprise. I think this has been pretty well documented in the media. Of course, I'm sort of the economist and want to understand the numbers. And so there's this lovely report called Banking on Climate Chaos that if you're looking for the receipts about the big banks funding climate change, then we've got a link here. It's bankingonclimatechaos.org. So that's in the chat now. We'll make sure to put that in the liner notes for the podcast and also on YouTube. I'll make sure that you've got the link there if you do want to dig into the report. But the numbers are just absolutely staggering. You can see that last year in 2023, RBC invested over $28 billion. Scotiabank invested over $24 billion. TD Bank invested over $20 billion. BMO invested over $15 billion, and CIBC invested over $15 billion as well. These are some of the top financiers in the world. The Canadian banks are all very, very, very prominent on these lists of financial institutions that are investing heavily in oil and gas. If we look at the total over 7 years, from 2016 to 2023, RBC has invested more than $256 billion in fossil fuels. Scotiabank, $192 billion, TD Bank, $178 billion, BMO, $148 billion, and CIBC at $134 billion. Like, to me, this is just absolutely ridiculous that, we are living in a world that is, we're seeing climate chaos. There was the atmospheric river in BC very recently. We've got an unseasonably warm fall here in Toronto right now. We're seeing these climate impacts across the country, and the big banks we know are investing literally billions of dollars into fossil fuels, right? But it's more than just about climate change. Like, I think this was huge. And that, I've got Monica here saying, I worked at Scotia and the head of product development asked me, a marketer, to ESG a fund, basically greenwash a fund. It's bad. Like, again, yes. So absolutely, this is huge. I'll get to questions about credit unions in a few minutes. But when it comes to, what I want to show here is this. I've got a photo up of Greta Thunberg, who's getting arrested. And she was at a climate rally. I think this was outside of the, what is it? The Eurovision big sort of music celebration and contest. There was a big climate protest, and she was wearing a keffiyeh. And this caught a lot of people off guard that understand, why is Greta, who's such a champion for climate change, also wearing sort of a symbol of pro-Palestinian solidarity? And well, this is because I think a lot of people really do understand that there is intersectionality between these crises around the world. And to me, the biggest connection is the banking sector. That not only have banks been under attack from climate activists, but they've also been under attack from activists who are upset that they are investing in weapons manufacturers. So here I've got a headline from CBC News. This is from July 11th, saying authors pull books from the Giller Prize to protest Scotiabank's investment in the Israeli defense contractor. So this was a huge issue. I'm not sure if people heard about this, where, really understanding that that there is this this Giller Prize, which is a prize for some of the best books that have been written for the last year. It's a very prestigious prize. It was sponsored by Scotiabank, the Scotiabank Giller Prize, but a lot of the authors were saying, no, like, we're going to pull our book. I don't want to be a part of this, right? Because of Scotia's involvement in investing in military companies. So of course, me being me, I had to dig into this, right? I had to look at, and really what it comes down to is Scotiabank is one of the top investors in a company called Elbit Systems. This is research from a group called AFSC, American Friends Service Committee. This is an incredible research organization. You can look up different issues, different companies and funds and sort of tracking sort of the dollars and where these investments are going. But their description for Elbit Systems is that they are Israel's largest weapons manufacturer. Its weapons are routinely used in war crimes against Palestinians, and its surveillance systems are used in Palestine and along the U.S.-Mexico border. That Elbit manufactures several weapons that are largely banned or considered particularly controversial under the laws of war. These weapons include cluster munitions, weaponized white phosphorus, and flechette projectiles. Again, these are weapons that don't discriminate between civilians and soldiers. So really, to me, this is an example. This is why people were so upset at Scotiabank, why so many authors wanted to pull their books from the prize. They didn't want to be associated with it, and I think for very good reason. I'm here to tell you that it's not just Scotiabank that's doing it, that every single bank is investing in these military companies. So this is research, a chart that I pulled from an organization called Project ESG. The URL is projectesg.info if you want to dive in to how much the banks are investing into military companies. But this shows that, all of the major Canadian banks are investing in weapons, right? So we know this, right? We know this. And Scotiabank, you can see, is the biggest investor, at least in Canada, when it comes to Elbit Systems, right? But all of the banks are investing in things like Lockheed Martin, investing in RTX Corp, which used to be Raytheon. These are a lot of military companies. So it's not just Scotiabank. I think that they kind of got targeted because they had that large investment in Elbit Systems. But this is something that all of the banks are doing. Right, and these are going to be, right now I'm talking about investments through the stock market. So these are through their funds. So these aren't necessarily the direct investment, but this is more about understanding that these banks are selling funds that have these companies inside of them. So if you have your investments at the banks, there's a good chance, unless you've specifically bought their sustainable funds, if you're just in their default funds, that you are also investing in these companies. Argavan asks, can we have access to the recording of this session so we can share it with friends who could not attend? Absolutely. We're going to have it on YouTube and the podcast. So, there will be lots of opportunities for you to share this with other folks. So really, when it comes to equity investments in the funds, and if you don't want to invest in military companies, we did do a YouTube video, how to switch advisors. This is with Daryl and I. If we did this earlier in the year, I did another one, which is how to divest from war. If you really want to dig into those topics, we've got other YouTube videos that we can post. There are lots of lessons that we can look at in terms of understanding, on the investment side, how that works. But what I want to focus on are actually their loans. So rather than looking at the banks and their investments in weapons, what I'm more interested are their loans. And I'm going to explain why in a minute. But that basically, you can see here, we've got BMO is making loans to Boeing and Jacob Solutions and Leidos and that RTX, which used to be Raytheon. We've got RBC making a plethora of loans into groups like Airbus Group, BAE Systems, Boeing, General Dynamics, Honeywell, L3 Harris Tech, Leidos, Lockheed Martin, Peraton, and Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce, the car company. They also make, I believe it's planes and engines and for things that are used for military. Scotiabank and CIBC also are providing these large loans to military companies. These are the ones that we know about. right? So these are the ones that we have the receipts on, and we can tell you the exact loans. That said, it took a lot of digging to be able to get this information. So, there could even be more that we don't know about. So this is just, I think, sort of scratching the surface in terms of the loans that banks are making. And I can see Arlie in the chat is saying that RBC fossil fuel versus green energy investments is that found that RBC had directed about 37 cents to low carbon solutions for every dollar they invested in fossil fuels in 2022. So yeah, like the banks are investing in good things as well, right? I don't want to dismiss that. They are doing good things. But my point here is that they will loan money. They will make investments in whatever earns them profit. That they don't take an ethical lens when it comes to this. That by default, they are loaning money to fossil fuels and to weapons manufacturers. That is just part of their business. It's not a huge part of their business. Like if we look at their entire loan portfolio, these might be somewhat, small percentages, but it's still there. And they are still some of the largest financiers in the world when it comes to these issues. And the reason this matters, the reason I care more about debt and the loans that they're making is that there is a direct link between keeping your deposits at the bank, that is turned into the debt that they are issuing. The system that we use, and this is across the entire Western world, this is like, not just Canada, this US and, basically every major economy in the world uses something called fractional reserve banking. Now, this is like a really, really, really nerdy topic, fractional reserve banking. I feel like I could do a whole mini course on this if there's interest in this. Maybe this is something I could dive into a little bit deeper. But really what I need you to understand is that every dollar that you keep deposited in a bank allows that bank to make about $20 worth of loans. That's how it is. Okay, I can get into the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of how that works, but really what I need you to understand is that when you put in $100 into as a deposit in the bank, that there is a 20x multiplier on that. That $100 will become $2,000 that bank can loan out. That is the system. That is how it works. Okay? So this is my way of saying that your deposits matter. That where you keep your deposit matters, because your deposits, when you keep money in a checking account at the bank, that you are directly facilitating a multiple of that dollar being created in terms of debt. And we know that part of that debt is going towards fossil fuels, is going towards military companies, right? We know that is the case. Right? This is a chart there's a great group called Project Drawdown. So Project Drawdown, Paul Hawken in the US, they did this awesome study where they looked at all the different impacts when it comes to individual climate action. So they looked at the carbon, savings that an individual could do by things like avoiding one cross-country round-trip flight, or adopting a vegetarian diet, adopting a vegan diet, right? Switching to an electric vehicle, switching to residential solar. What they found is that moving about $8,000, I think they assume that most people have about $8,000 in their checking and saving account at the bank, that moving $8,000 from a carbon intensive bank to a climate responsible bank can yield twice the direct emissions reductions of adopting a vegetarian diet. That it saves about 1.5 tons of CO2 per year in emissions, right? So I'm not saying ignore the other stuff. Absolutely, I want you eating less meat, right? I want you, switching to an electric vehicle, or even using public transit or bicycle. I want you putting solar. I want you flying less. I want you doing all these things. But if you are not looking at where your deposits are held, right, you're missing a huge part of the puzzle. And I know for some of us, for some people, it's hard. You can't get rid of your car. Some people live in rural places where it could be really hard, or if you rent, you don't have a place to charge an electric car. A lot of people struggle when it comes to eating less meat and things like that. So some of these actions can be tough. Moving your money is so easy. This is such low-hanging fruit when it comes to climate action and individual actions that we can take. Heike has the question here. When I have this conversation with my finance friends, they defend those decisions with fiduciary responsibility. So yeah, like this is part of the problem, is that banks are solely exist to maximize profits. That's what they do. And they don't really care where those profits come from. Now, I would say there's a fiduciary duty involved in terms of sort of ethical behavior, that there are risks involved, that if people are switching their banks because of this, there's a reason why a lot of European banks have these sort of lists and these exclusions where they're not investing in fossil fuels and they're not investing in military actions. And to be clear, those aren't necessarily more profitable than other investments, right? At the same time, Kelly asks, is Tangerine/ING now the same as Scotia? Yes, absolutely, Kelly. So Tangerine got acquired by Scotia. So again, their deposits count towards Scotia's deposits. So absolutely, Tangerine does count, that they would be considered a carbon intensive bank as far as I'm concerned. Absolutely. But we're so lucky here in Canada, right? Because the banks, I get it. The banks suck, right? I'm not a huge fan. I don't like the banks, right? I'm not a huge fan. You can see why, right? But sometimes, we are stuck in these situations. There was this huge boycott against Loblaws recently. I don't know if people were part of that, where people were trying to boycott Loblaws and Shoppers Drug Mart. But the problem was, where else were you going to get food that we don't have? Imagine we had all these amazing food co-ops all over where, oh, not a big deal. You don't have to shop at Loblaws. Instead, you could shop at your local, food grocery cooperative. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, with the banking system, we're so lucky in that we do have this amazing credit union system, right? We love our credit unions. And we're so lucky that Canada has such a strong credit union system, because credit unions are structured as cooperatives. Now, they are structured provincially, that co-ops are incorporated provincially. So credit unions will operate for each province, right? So each province will have their own credit unions. But really the beautiful thing is that whereas banks, the way the governance structure works is that it's one share, one vote. So people who own more shares get more votes, right? Whereas with credit unions, it's one member, one vote, so that everybody has an equal voice. And because credit unions are co-ops, they're not beholden to shareholders. They don't have that same sort of fiduciary responsibilities where they have to, do everything in their power to maximize profits. Instead, they're in a position where they can put people over profit, in the sense that they can invest in customer service. They can often do the right thing in a way that banks certainly can't. Wissam says, FYI, there's a food co-op in Toronto called Karma for anyone interested. I've shopped at Karma. I love it. It's in the annex. So I used to pass through that part of town quite well. But sadly, there isn't, a food co-op in my neighborhood. But I wish we had more of them. I wish that food co-ops were as ubiquitous as credit unions are across Canada. Because credit unions offer the exact same services as a bank. It's the same stuff. It's like literally the same service offering. And it is the same system with fractional reserve banking, where every dollar of deposit allows for $20 in loans. That fractional reserve banking system applies to credit unions as well. But you got to understand that whereas the banks, their loan portfolio, they lend money to these large multinational corporations, including fossil fuels and weapons. Credit unions don't. The credit unions are so much more local. The loans, if you look at their loan portfolio, it's overwhelmingly going to be mortgages and small business loans. Now, some credit unions have explicitly said, they've got statements saying, we're not going to fund military, fossil fuels, etc. They've got their exclusions. Most of them, a lot of them, are smaller, maybe haven't made those explicit statements, but just by default, they're not loaning money to large multinational corporations. They're loaning money to your neighbors. Michelle asks, how can we see what credit unions loan to? Okay, so then I wasn't planning on going here, but there is a really cool tool that if we want to use, I'm just going to show you very quickly. It's bank.green is a really cool tool that I've used. Now, this doesn't apply for weapons, but it does apply for climate change. And so here I can choose Canada, right? And let's see if I can here. Let me see. Oh, no, I'm going to get here. Let me see if I can throw this link in the chat, and I will include this in the podcast and liner notes. There we go. And that really, when we look at this, that we can now search for. So here's, Alterna Savings. This is one of the credit unions that I'm a member of. And you can see here that they've actually looked at the credit union's loan portfolio. And it says, my bank is great. It's got sort of the emoji with the hearts. Your money is definitely not funding the fossil fuel industry. We can't be sure of everything that your bank is doing, but at least your money is not enabling gas, oil, or coal extraction. Right. So it's really cool. This is a really cool tool where you can look up the different banks and credit unions that, if we were to look up, for example, like Royal Bank, RBC, check my bank, they're going to have a poor score, that they have the angry emoji where, your money is funding the climate crisis at an alarming rate. RBC is one of the 60 biggest funders of fossil fuels in the world. So it's really cool that there are now these third-party organizations that are doing this research for us, right? So really, really cool tool there that I've used to understand where credit unions are actually loaning to. So really, to me, credit unions by default are just such a more ethical option, that they still do that sort of, money multiplier that for each dollar of deposit does turn into $20 in loans, but their loan portfolio is going to be so much cleaner than a bank. Now, I know some people have some fears or concerns about credit unions, so I'm just going to address these rather quickly. I'm going to go through them. Number one is that people think that banks are safer, that, it's a big bank, I feel safe at a big institution. Your deposits are just as safe at a credit union as they are at a bank. They are provincially regulated, so instead of CDIC, Canadian Deposit Insurance Corporation, credit unions are going to be part of a provincial insurance system. So here in Ontario, it's called DICO, Deposit Insurance Corporation of Ontario. And whereas at banks, your deposits are insured up to $100K per account, at credit unions, they're actually insured up to $250K per account. So you actually get more coverage at the credit union than you do at the bank, which is really, really cool. In Manitoba, I think it's unlimited, that I don't even think there's that 250K cap. So, really this idea that banks are safer, nope, really not clear there. Myth number two is that there aren't enough ATMs. So again, people are like, but my bank, I have these ATMs all over the place that I can use. And it's so convenient. Well, I'm here to tell you that all credit unions are part of something called the Exchange Network. There's a little link here that we can use. If you want to punch in your address, you can see where all of the free ATMs are, because credit unions are part of this thing called the Exchange Network. So if you join a credit union, you can use an ATM at any other ATM for free. I believe there's also, the National Bank is part of that ATM network. So you can use an ATM at National Bank for free. We used to be able to do HSBC, but they just got acquired from RBC. So I think that HSBC in Canada is probably out of the network now, but it really is cool. There are so many ATMs. I am absolutely part of a couple different credit unions, and there is a Meridian right by me. And so I often, if I need the ATM, I'll just go to the Meridian. I can use that for free, even though I'm not a Meridian client. There was a question about Meridian saying bank.green says Meridian Credit Union is most likely funding the climate crisis. How is Meridian? So this is a great question. Thank you so much, Steve. That really, I did actually inquire about this, and bank.green is in the process of reevaluating Meridian. I think that their policies get them such that they should deserve a higher score than bank.green will give them, but I've kind of informed both Meridian and bank.green, by all means, feel free to do the same. But I also noticed that and think that Meridian might not necessarily be getting a fair shake from that website. The third myth that people have about credit unions is that there's less innovation, that you're not going to have the same tools and resources. I'm here to tell you that it's awesome. I have an app on my phone. I can take a photo of my checks to deposit them. That I can do e-transfers. That really any of the technological innovations that bank has, credit unions have the same thing. Sometimes they're like a little bit slower to roll it out. That the banks might be faster, when it came to releasing an app or a new feature. That the banks sometimes can be a little bit quicker, but generally speaking, the credit unions have absolutely the same capabilities. Pui is asking me, can they do Apple Pay? That's a great question. Sadly, I use a Samsung, so I don't know. I do have, I would imagine that, certainly any credit card that you have, no question, you can do through Apple Pay. I've added that to my phone. I don't know about debit cards. I've never tried to add a debit card to Apple Pay before. But that is a great question. I'll look into that for you. So really, when it comes to credit unions, I do have a few hot tips that I can end you with. So Steve is saying Apple Pay, Meridian credit card, yes. Meridian debit card, no. That's my understanding as well. Is I think with any of the, whether it's Google Pay or Apple Pay, I don't know whether you can really do debit cards. I think they are sort of more structured for credit cards. My hot tips for you when it comes to credit unions is that really I would only use credit unions for a checking account. That when it comes to things like insurance or debt, credit cards and mortgages, and even when it comes to your investments, I really do want you to shop around. That credit unions are really, really good for checking accounts. They're not always the best for insurance, debt, and investments. Arlie is asking about GICs. Again, shop around. That most credit unions are pretty good when it comes to GICs. I do like them. That said, I want you to shop around for the best rate, right? Like shop around. Really love to do that. And that when it comes to credit unions, it is really easy to switch. A lot of people think it's very, very challenging when it comes to switching, but it's easier to switch, and it's now gotten even easier because I'm really, really thrilled to announce that I've launched, it's now live. Today is the day that it is live, my Good Investing Classroom. So this is what I've been working on for the last few months. This is the first step on your sustainable finance journey. Right? If you want to bank ethically, but you don't know where to start, I've launched my classroom. This is now up and running. If you go to my website, in the top right corner, there's a little classroom button there that you can click on, or you can, we'll provide the links in the chat and everywhere else. It's Future Tim coming to you with a special gift. YouTube subscribers get a 25% discount to the classroom. Use coupon code FIREBANK, all one word, FIREBANK at checkout for your 25% discount. But I'm so thrilled to welcome people into my classroom. This is going to be how I'm going to be delivering a lot of my online content for folks. Really what I'm launching with are 2 mini courses. I've got the Fire Your Bank and Join a Credit Union mini course. I've also got an Ethical Emergency Fund mini course. Those are up. Those are in there. If you want to fire your bank and join a credit union, I have a step-by-step process for how to do it. If you want to set up an ethical emergency fund, that's always like the first step before you invest. I want you to have an emergency fund. So I show you how to do it. We've got a few different options there. I'm going to be hosting monthly Ask Me Anythings for classroom members. So, really, really excited for those, so that if you're in the midst of firing your bank and you've got questions and you don't know how to do it, or you get stuck somewhere, don't worry about it. We're going to have a monthly session where you can ask me. I will absolutely answer the question. And more courses on the way. That this really is going to be the platform that I'm using now to be able to publish my courses. That, when I got into, became a financial planner, I got into finance, my grandma said, Tim, I always saw you as more of a teacher. Right? And I never really knew what she was talking about, but now I absolutely get it. That, that I am on a mission to be able to help 1 million Canadians invest intentionally. That really is my mission. And the only way I'm going to do it is by scaling digitally. That I can't do that one-on-one. I'm still doing the one-on-ones, but it's at a higher rate. Not everyone can afford my hourly rate. So I created something that really is truly accessible. That, it's $10 a month or $100 a year to join the classroom. You get access to all those mini courses, to the AMAs. You're going to recoup this very quickly via savings. That if I can get you hooked up with a free checking account at a credit union, or if we can get you into an emergency fund that pays a higher rate of return, right, then you're going to make that money back very, very quickly. This is also the best way to support me. So if you love the work that I'm doing and you want me to keep teaching people and doing these webinars and, pushing forward with good investing, that this is one of the best ways to support me is just simply join the classroom. And I do have scholarships available. So I really don't want, really don't want people to be, if it is a burden for you financially, just let us know. We'll find a way to be able to get you in. Arlie says, wow, very reasonable price for the classroom. I took Tim's course and it was life-changing. So Arlie, I'm going to be introducing some of these investment classes into this classroom later on, but it really is, the power of digital learning is incredible. And this is how I'm going to be doing it going forward. So really, really want to encourage you to be able to join the classroom. So I'll ask the chat, who's ready to join the classroom? Is there anyone in the chat that's ready to join? I would love for you to join. Use that 25% Fire Bank coupon code, and you'll get it. Amazing. Tammy says, joined already. Arlie says, I'm in. Heather says, can't wait. Ryan says, amazing. Yamini says, see you all there. We're so excited for everyone to join. Paul has joined already. I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much for those early supporters who are there. Really, we're absolutely, I can't tell you how excited I am to have this little space for the internet where I'm going to be able to teach folks.